What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Christian Hanna Horror here, and today we're doing a review of Three from Hell, the third movie, and now what's the Firefly trilogy, with the first being House of a Thousand, and then Devil's Rejects, and then Three from Hell. So what's interesting about my review is I actually got to do a double feature where I got to sit through the Devil's Rejects and then immediately watch Three from Hell, which really was so enjoyable of a way to go into this movie, because The Devil's Rejects is just a masterpiece in my opinion in terms of horror and probably one of Rob Zombie's best works. So let's just get started with Three from Hell. Okay, so preconceived notions about Three from Hell. So seeing Three from Hell, I did have preconceived notions on what the story was going to be, how characters were going to get introduced, etc., who they were going to be, how we were going to get rid of certain characters, and I was about half right on certain things that I thought were going to happen. Now, it's no secret, I'm not spoiling anything by saying this at all, that Sid Haig is not in this movie the whole way through. And I don't know if it was a concern on people about that, being upset, but I don't think majority of people really expected Sid to do the whole movie, because he's not necessarily old, he's like geriatric old. He's extremely old. They even notioned this in the movie, and God love Sid Haig. I hope we keep him around for years to come, and his performance in this movie still delivers. Of course, he's still Sid Haig. Even though he's older, that clown is still inside of him. So seeing him in this movie was extremely enjoyable. He's obviously in the first act of the film, and even though he's older, he still has that charm, that delivery, and it's Captain Spaulding. I'll say that. It is Captain Spaulding still. So, the Three from Hell. So that obviously means we have another member of this Firefly family, and we do know that it was the gentleman who was Doomhead in 31. Now, while 31 I thought was Zombie's weakest film, I still thought performance of Doomhead in that movie was incredible. He was a great character actor. He was also good in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 as one of the EMT drivers. So when I saw he was in this movie, I was extremely happy, because I was concerned about who the other third was going to be, because I didn't realize at first who it was till I started seeing the trailers. So real quick, let's talk about the outside elements of this film. Rob Zombie has definitely evolved as a filmmaker. One thing I noticed about this movie that was quite refreshing, and not necessarily not Rob Zombie, as I said, he's growing, was the theater of the mind is pretty prevalent in this movie. If you don't know what that means that you may think you see a bloodbath in scenes, but you really don't see the actions take place on screen. You see the aftermath, you hear what's going on in some parts of the movie, and you kind of play it out in your head about what you're seeing. And I gotta say, in this movie, the way he does that act works out really good, because it makes things seem even more brutal. I'm not saying he never did that in House of a Thousand or Devil's Rejects or other movies for that matter, but I don't remember noticing it as strong as I did in this movie. So let's talk about Sheri Moon real quick. She has obviously a very strong presence in this film. I want to say this about Sheri Moon's performance in Three from Hell. She had a great role in this movie. There were a lot of great scenes with Sheri Moon as Baby Firefly. I'll say this about her performance in this movie and the character that she played, the evolution of Baby Firefly in this movie, was there were a couple moments where she did have that little bit of an annoyance, but it's not necessarily like, oh my god, I want to punch her. It's just that, okay, let's get that part over with. But there were some overwhelmingly great scenes with her, whether it had been in the jail cell, whether it had been when she's out of the jail cell. She had a great role. Zombie gave his wife a great role in this movie in terms of what her character does. So okay, let's talk about Bill Moseley. Bill Moseley is the most lovable character in this movie, which is strange because he's such a demonic villain in The Devil's Rejects, and even more so I would say in House of a Thousand, pretty much about even. I mean, he did have some charm and some comedy to him in those films, but you really can't help but like him in this film, and I think part of the reason of that is this. In The Devil's Rejects, Bill Moseley was extremely antagonistic, and he did not like his family. He did not like being around his sister or his dad. And Bill Moseley is kind of not necessarily happy, but he's not extremely pissed off and just antagonistic. He's just really accepted what his world is, and that he could die at any moment based on the things that he's doing, rightfully so, obviously. Okay, so let's talk about Richard Brake real quick, because I want to give him a huge round of applause for this movie, and I want to credit Zombie for what he did with Richard Brake in this movie. Okay, so Richard Brake is the half-brother of the Fireflies. Now, obviously, this character was written for the movie because we never heard about Richard Brake Drake's character, this half-brother from The Devil's Rejects or House of a Thousand? Naturally, you know, of course, because who knew that Rob was going to do this movie? So when Sid's too old to be one of the three, we got to make some changes. What's really great about the character of Richard Brake, and excuse me because his prison name or his felon name is this really tricky nickname that I could not remember for the life of me, and I didn't want to pull my phone out to write it down to remember, but we know who I'm talking about, the third member, the third one from hell. What's really great about his character was he did not come into this movie being loud and bodacious, and Rob trying to basically push him in this movie saying, okay, well, Sid's not here, but look at this guy, he's just as funny, and he's crazy too. His character was a little bit more subdued. He kind of made Bill's character in the movie feel like he had somebody on the same wavelength as him. Him and Bill got along great in this movie. They were really like brothers. I'm with you, you with me, we're gonna do this together. So that element is vastly different with Bill Moseley's relationship with his brother than it was in The Devil's Rejects. He was always aggravated with Baby. Baby was making him mad all the time. So this element changes Otis's personality in this movie. But at this point, it's like we don't need Otis to be so antagonistic and just mean for us to like him, because we're here. We're seeing Three from Hell because of Otis. He's one of the biggest reasons to watch the movie, in my opinion, because what other character besides Captain Spaulding was as great as Otis, in my opinion? Now, what really was kind of the curveball was Baby Firefly in this movie's personality. She is clearly the one that was the most affected, it seemed like, from the prison time. Otis is so much of a Marilyn Manson in his own type. He was cynical before he ever went to jail. But Baby Firefly seemed to have really mentally kind of lost it, being in solitary confinement throughout the years and just losing it. So she has these strange moments of her daziness and weird moments, and even Otis makes a comment like, she's really losing it. So they do mention that. At first you're wondering what's going on with her, but then you realize, well, she was in prison for 10 years and probably spent a lot of it in solitary, so she's probably just kind of loopy. Okay, so the last spoiler-free thing I'll talk about with Three from Hell is this. It's mainly going to go back to Rob Zombie in terms of his directing, in terms of the storytelling in this movie, because it's very precise. This is almost a road picture, and naturally so, because the three from hell are escaping. They have to get out of prison, and you know we know the story. We don't, even though you haven't seen the movie, you know what the story's about. So it's almost like a half road picture, because they're getting away. They arrive to a destination, which I'll keep that vague, you know. I will say that they leave the country, but I don't want to get into too much, because I want you guys to see this movie. I don't want to just say in too much to where you're just like, I don't know, because it's worth a great watch, I'll say that. Rob Zombie's filmmaking has really not necessarily evolved. I think he's just kind of changing and trying new things. This movie had much more of a streamline to it. There wasn't as much MTV crazy things like there was in House of a Thousand. Not that The Devil's Rejects had that. And there's just a big stream of reality. I think with The Devil's Rejects, the only thing that had that outer worldly feel was seeing Tiny in the movie, because he was this monstrous Freddy Krueger looking character. So whenever you see Tiny in The Devil's Rejects, it kind of reminisces you to that crazy feel of House of a Thousand Corpses. So with this movie having no character like that in it, it's very streamlined reality. It feels very reality based. A little bit more so, like I said, than The Devil's Rejects, in my opinion. Zombie does a lot of great cinematography choices. It's very classic. It's very old school. There's scenes where there's dialogue going on between the three talking, and instead of these multicam shots of this person says something, another camera shows the other person, you'll see the camera move between a couple of them while they're talking, and it just almost makes you feel like you're there, so to speak. So I really appreciate that old school style filmmaking, I would assume, you know, because I've seen that in older films. Maybe it's because there's just not the money for multicams for these kinds of scenes, but it works, it fits. Zombie also has this nice use of slow motion type elements with classic 70s rock, which is just pure Rob Zombie. And one of the things I love, being a huge fan of the 70s music he uses, and good stuff too. There's a great soundtrack. I will be picking up the vinyl for Three from Hell because it's got some great stuff. I think Iron Butterfly's in there, you know what to expect music-wise when you watch a Rob Zombie film. So the style of the way he shot this movie, it seems more mature. I think that's the word I would like to use. It seems very much more mature, very more Rob wants to tell this story. He wants to get the characters to where they need to be and not really do a lot of crazy things. There is that classic 70s style scene change where a scene freezes and then it moves off screen. You see the next screen come in. That felt classic, and I know Rob Zombie's done that before, so I did like the way he shot this movie, it's very basic, it's very straightforward, it's scene to scene, it's storytelling, so to speak, and it was nice. I was nice. It's okay that this movie is not shot exactly like House of a Thousand. That movie is there, it's happened, you can't replicate it. It very much feels like Devil's Rejects in the terms of the look, and you can almost feel that desert kind of heat with this movie, just the way you felt with Devil's Rejects. This movie feels just like Devil's Rejects, and seeing it literally a minute after Devil's Rejects ended, it was streamlined. It was very much streamlined. So this movie basically takes place 10 years after their arrest, which I think was 78 for the Devil's Rejects, so this is about 88. I don't feel that Zombie made enough of an effort to make it really feel like the late 80s in parts of the movies. Not that there is a whole lot of sequences to really be able to notice things of that nature to where you really feel like you're in the late 80s. I do think there were some chances he could have done to just go with that little bit extra mile to have the aesthetics of the 80s in houses and things like that. But then again, the characters from the movie still feel extremely 70s because, granted, you know, Moseley and Baby were in jail, so they really don't know what the 80s were like. They never lived it because they were in jail. So I would imagine if you get locked up in 1978 and you're in this room, you're just going to remember what the world was, not what it's turning into. So that's okay. That's a minor gripe. Does this movie live up to House of a Thousand Corpses? Does this movie live up to The Devil's Rejects? I say this in the best way possible. No. And I don't think anybody really should expect it to. Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand have aged like fine wines. Devil's Rejects is regarded in such high regards. I think a lot of people claim it to be Rob's best movie. While I enjoy House of a Thousand Corpses the most, I wouldn't argue that Devil's Rejects is not his swan song, so to speak. But is it a worthy entry in the series? 100%. I definitely think this movie is worth a watch. You have to watch it if you're a Devil's Rejects fan, number one. But especially if you just like gritty horror that doesn't meet you halfway. It's not politically correct. It says things that you shouldn't be saying in movies today. It shows things that are just taboo with movies today. And you just want to see unadulterated manslaughter. I mean, that's there with Three from Hell. So definitely a welcomed addition to the Firefly family movies. Thank you guys for watching this video. This is Christian Hanna Horror. Please be sure to sub to the channel. Check out the description, the Patreon, where I do all my own music for my videos, and then you can also check out the Teespring, where I make my own t-shirts, and you can rock Christian Hanna Horror shirts wherever you go. Thank you guys for watching this video. We're going to see you guys next time.